Hey guys, Pete here. Today we're going to be talking live about Better Call Saul. We're going to discuss the first two episodes of the sixth and final season. I guess these are the first two in the first half because we have a halfway point break in this season. We're going to have two different installments. And hopefully, you know me. I'm Pete Peppers. This is my channel, but I'm joined today by my friend Gil from the One Take channel and his brother Adam. And they do a podcast together called the Saul Cast. Is that correct?
That's
Yep.
right.
Yeah, and so you guys wanna say hello?
Definitely. Yeah, like you said, I'm Gil. This is
Adam.
and yeah, we he helps out on the One Take channel as well, where we cover Better Call Saul, a bunch of other shows, a bunch of movies. But right now, our main focus is Saulcast, where we're talking about Better Call Saul every week.
That's cool. I see in the comments there, someone said you guys look like the twins.
Yeah.
Yeah, be careful. You don't want to mess with us.
We're actually a lot scarier than they are, so watch out.
Yeah, so, we do this, I've done this in the past, for The Expanse. We did a podcast thing together, Gil and I, a few weeks ago, and we wanted to talk more. And this is basically all this is. We're not going to recap the whole episode. We're just going to talk about some things that we didn't get to talk about in our coverage, things that came up after the fact. Maybe I've been spending all my time reading interviews and listen to the Insider podcast, so there's a lot of insights there that I didn't have when I made my video. And I think we should definitely dive into this teaser. Like, that is something that I've been waiting to talk about with other people. But I think because before we jump right into that, I think that maybe we should get into our general feelings on the episodes overall. You just sort of get that out of the way, because then if we run low on time or something like that, we'll at least have been able to do that. And I think maybe you guys can start us off there if that's all right.
Sure. Yeah, for me, these two episodes kind of did all the best things that Better Call Saul does, which is it gave us plenty of suspense, especially on the Nacho storyline. It gave us plenty of great character drama, especially watching Kim and seeing what she's really capable of with the Kettlemans. And then, of course, we also got some of what I thought was the best humor on this show. But Jimmy at the country club running into Kevin, I was laughing harder at that than I think I've ever laughed at this show. So this show has always been a great blending of multiple genres, and I think these first two episodes kind of perfectly captured that.
I especially loved just when we see Saul Goodman start to strip naked, and like my first thought is, okay, maybe he's gonna hide in the shower or something. But just he's such a quick thinker, thinking on his feet and anticipating how other people react. Where he just sits there and starts toweling off. He knows no one's gonna look.
Yeah, it's the
That's
bro
just like the
code.
kind of humor we love. Yeah, the bro code, exactly.
Yeah, so I mean, I think, there was some table setting going on here. I mean, it's inevitable, you have to do that. But I think that the potential of what's to come, it just gave it a different feeling than previous episodes. And I do think they kind of moved into things, like some of the stories moved a lot faster than what we've learned to expect from them in the past. I think there's sort of an incremental step going up from the previous seasons. I mean, I think pacing wise, season 5 was a lot more intense.
Mhm.
And I think they didn't really dial it back as much this time I mean, if you think about the season 2 opener or season 3, I mean, they definitely had a way of just recentering everything at the beginning of a season in a way that doesn't really happen here. And I like that there's trust in the audience. They don't stop to explain everything. They know that we know these characters. They know we're familiar with this world. And there was a lot to kind of put together on
Mhm.
our own, but I think they did a pretty good job of leading us there. Did you guys find that to be the case?
Yeah, I was gonna say, in terms of trusting the audience, uh, after these couple of episodes, I saw there's always debate after you watch an episode of Better Call Saul, usually over where is a character's head at, that sort of thing. But never have I seen so much debate over what did we actually witness? What was Mike doing with the envelope? What was the whole plan around Nacho? There were so many questions. People who was following Jimmy and Kim at the end of the second episode. I think a lot of that on rewatch. What was Lalo doing with those two farmers? On rewatch, a lot of that makes complete sense, and you can easily connect the dots. But definitely a lot of trusting us to just watch the characters and understand what they're doing without a lot of handholding.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I appreciate that, obviously. I like to be able to, feel like I figured something out when I'm watching it, put things together. I mean, it's definitely a satisfying way to experience it. And, the teaser, it brought up so many questions that there was a kind of afterglow when I got done with that. Like, it just sort of hung over the whole experience of watching it, because it's like, oh wow, we're going someplace we've never been. These are things that we've been thinking about since, Breaking Bad. What does Saul Goodman do at home? What does that look like? And I think this is like this is a show that is famous for cold opens, right? Memorable cold opens that linger throughout a season, and this is one of the best ones that they ever had. So I think we should probably get into that a little bit. And there's a couple of things. One, I saw this a couple weeks early, and nobody else I knew had seen it, so I was just sort of sitting there with that, just wanting to talk about it. It's just it's not something you could have guessed would be I mean, obviously you're thinking Gene is going to be the opener, but the fact that not only are we going to see Saul's house, but it looks like this. I mean, did you guys have any idea that this might be the way that Saul Goodman lived?
Well, first off, I want to mention that I can attest to Pete just itching to talk about this
Yeah.
because in the weeks leading up to the premiere, he kept messaging me to ask if I'd seen it yet. And I was so jealous that you already had. And you're like, do you care about spoilers? And I was like, yes, very much. I do. But one thing I love is that this is the only show I've ever seen where simply showing us a scene that is in color and not in black and white, that choice alone is like a jaw-dropping decision. And suddenly you're seeing something really special. And
and they kind of juked you out at the beginning because you think it's in black and white at first. You think this is going to be your typical Gene opening, but it wasn't.
Right. That transition to color was like, whoa, okay, we're about to see something insane. And one thing I definitely felt in these first couple of episodes is some momentum towards a conclusion. And I think a big part of that is this opener, which we've seen Gene. So we've seen kind of the epilogue of the series, but this is the first time we've kind of seen momentum towards the Gene timeline. And I think that song choice, The Days of Wine and Roses, that nostalgic feeling of the good times are rapidly coming to an end, or by the time we see that scene, they've already come to an end, and that just kind of hangs over everything.
It makes me think of that song that's like, those were the days, my friend.
I thought they'd never end.
And also one thing that this show does a lot is it just explores like the physical space that people live in. So like, for example, you often get these shots of Hector sitting there alone in his wheelchair in this dank kind of musty old nursing home sort of setting. Similarly, like we'd gotten pretty used to seeing Saul living and working out of the back of a nail salon in what essentially was a closet. And now we cut to see, he gradually ends up advancing. He's
there you go.
Yeah, exactly. That's the perfect contrast. This room with the golden toilet is the size of the office with the little bed that he used to use.
That's true. I hadn't made that connection, but yeah, this is exactly about how much space he had total before.
Yeah. And so the starting set the tone so well, but then on top of that, of course, you're watching closely to try and get any clue you can into what was happening with Saul Goodman's personal life. Specifically, where is Kim? And then, of course, you end with that slow zoom on the tequila stopper, which doesn't exactly answer the question, but it makes you think about it in a new light. Did Jimmy hold on to that stopper because it reminded him of Kim? Or the fact that it's there? Kim would never leave without it. Does that mean she's still around? Or does it mean she died? Or does it mean she's lost a sentimental attachment to it and she's left Jimmy behind? So it doesn't answer the question, but it teases it in such a impactful way. the fact that they've been able to attach so much significance to that image of the tequila stopper is pretty amazing. And yeah, so it makes for a great kind of cliffhanger ending to that cold open.
Yeah, and that was the second point I wanted to make with all these Easter eggs. I mean, there there's so much in this, like, because we're going in a prequel series, and we know that there's connections between, you know, these episodes that we saw in the other series years ago that they're going to pop up from time to time. Now we're at the point in Better Call Saul where we've had 5 full seasons of that, and you know, they're so good at not hitting you over the head with stuff, but just making it nostalgic in a way that works. And I mean, this is like over the top amount of Easter eggs here. Like, you know, when I first saw this, I thought, okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a bonus video about every single thing that I see in this thing. You know what I mean? Like, you can't help it. That's like the natural reaction to seeing all this different stuff. And you know, they've always done that. We talked about this in the past, Gil, on several occasions about how they use objects and how they use people in their own spaces to convey what's happening, you know, where there is no dialogue. You know, there's nobody explaining why this person is doing what they're doing or what they're doing. So they explain it visually, and they're so good at that. And here you just have overload, right? There's just a ton of things that you remember. It's like I said, the nostalgia's there, but it's not like, oh, hey, look, this is a thing we're going to do just to remind you how cool our show is. And, you know, you guys are all, you know, on the joke or whatever. It feels like it's purposeful. And then, you know, I know you guys have probably seen this too, but Peter Gould has said in several places, including the Insider podcast, that not only are there a lot of callbacks, but there's also a lot of things that are going to be really important in the season we hadn't seen yet. And I noticed that right away, that connection of seeing the time machine book that you see later in the upcoming episode. And then that trains you to think, okay, now what do I need to be looking for? You know, what am I going to see that's going to tie us back? That's going to be a hint that we're going closer to Saul Goodman.
Right, after every episode now, we're gonna have to go back and rewatch that teaser and see what dots we can connect. Yeah, I think, one thing I noticed on rewatching this show recently is how much time you spend alone with a character, and that's a tough thing to pull off on TV. In a book, you have the character narrating their thoughts, but on this show, you just follow Jimmy, and you'll often see him at the back of his nail salon alone. So they have to find really clever ways to show you what's on a character's mind. So it might be
Like
Kim
that
just
with the phone.
what's that? Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah, when he's praying for,
I need a
some
phone call. Come on, give me a phone call.
exactly.
Yeah, I was just thinking of that. Him being in the store, throwing the ball against the wall.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
like the CC stress balls, the CC mobile stress
Which,
balls.
like, that's what real life is like. You know, it's not all full of things happening. And so it's the fact that they can show something that we can all relate to in real life, but actually make it entertaining. It's sort of a miracle.
It really is. And
Yeah.
it's, you know, in a lesser show, you'll have characters just constantly opening up to each other and telling each other what they're feeling, what's on their mind. But in real life, people often keep that stuff to themselves. So in these first 2 episodes, for example, we don't have Jimmy telling Kim, you know, hey, I'm pretty traumatized from our recent experiences. I'm a little off my game. Instead, you have him, you know, slip up and say Lalo to the DA. And then he goes and sits in a room alone for a few seconds, and he's sitting there thinking to himself. I mean, you have to kind of fill in the blanks, but to me, he's thinking, man, what did I just do? Like, I really need to get my head straight.
You know, I really can't think of a single time those two characters discussed their feelings to each other. They show their feelings, like Kim throwing the bottles off the roof, and then the next day sweeping up the broken glass. Like, that's a much more entertaining and I think intelligent way to show someone's inner state.
Right. Show, don't tell.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't want to go off too far into season 5, but yeah, that's one of the things that really stood out to me about their relationship and where things might go, was that those 2 balcony scenes in season 5, because you could see that she was embracing that. She's throwing the bottle. There's that side of her. Maybe there's more that we don't know about, kind of thing going on. But at the end, she still cleans up, even though Jimmy's like, nah, you know, don't worry about it. That's why we have people. That's why we pay rent or whatever, to have them take care of that for us. So Yeah, you're spot on there. There's so many different examples of stuff like that. So I guess we'll probably mention it some more. We'll could probably come back to this teaser again, but let's go through the different characters. I thought would be the easiest way to move through this because there's a lot of plot and a lot of intersection. So we might as well just talk about the individual characters. And I guess we'll start out with Lalo. That's sort of the first thing that we see post season 5 finale. And if you guys want to pick up with that, why don't you go ahead?
Sure. Well, I guess first off, we can kind of clear up the Lalo body double concept, where
Yeah.
basically he wants the world to think he's dead, especially he wants Gus to think he's dead. So apparently, he's had a sort of plan B ready, where he has a couple of farmers that live right off the compound, one of whom looks a lot like him, one of whom has had dental work done by Lalo's dentist to ensure that if someone ever checks this man's body, they'll think, oh, this is Lalo. So basically, his first visit after escaping the massacre is these two farmers. He has the guy shave his beard, leave his mustache and soul patch, brought the dead body back to the compound, burned it so nobody would know that it's not Lalo. The twins find it, and now the world thinks he's dead. And I saw somebody in the comments here asking, why was that body double okay with being killed? I think it's left a little bit up to interpretation, but my impression is that he didn't know that he was a body double.
He didn't have the look of a man who was ready to be executed.
Right. If he knew he was a body double, he probably wouldn't have grown out that big bushy beard.
Yeah.
So Lalo is charming and as terrifying as ever, I thought.
Yeah, as far as that's concerned, I think that maybe he did understand that he was a double, but not that meant he was going to die on that day.
Yeah.
Maybe
you know what I mean?
He'd have to show up in court one day or something and pretend
Yeah,
to be
or
Lalo.
just stand outside of a warehouse somewhere, where someone could see him. There's a lot of different ways that he could think that what he was doing was just, to pay back for the care that he had for his family. And yeah, and one of the things that I think is interesting about that is that you kind of see that Lalo, what I love about this is that they're reminding us that this super fun, this super charismatic character is absolutely dangerous and he's brutal and he's going to do what he has to do to get whatever he wants. Right. You know what I mean? Like he's going to sit there and smile and drink their coffee and then he's going to slit their throats or whatever. But what I thought was really under the surface a little bit is that he's not happy about doing this. You see that look on his face in the mirror whenever, he says, "You look very handsome," or whatever he says to the guy after he shaves. And you see the smile disappear whenever he's not putting it on for him anymore. You see like his face drop. And I thought that was a really nice touch because he's brutal, but he doesn't necessarily feel good about this. And that was one of those things that we saw about him in season 5 whenever he brought everybody into when he brought Nacho into the compound and he's introducing everyone. He cared about his people. He cared about the normal people that were there. And that's part of why this was such a serious bit of crossing the line by what Gus did.
Yeah, I think there are no characters on this show that are just outright evil. Even Lalo has some sort of code. I remember thinking last season at one point we were having a conversation where like this Lalo guy is so lovable. Is he really all that bad? And then he reminisces with Hector about where he got that bell from and how they basically burned
Look
a
at
man.
that smile.
Yeah, look at that guy. How can you not love him? He burned a professor and his wife alive at a hotel, and then he went back in to get the bell as a keepsake. So he can be evil, but when they feel disrespected or they feel wronged. But I agree with you. When he killed his body double, the look on his face when he's standing behind him, to me, was a look that said, I am mentally preparing to murder someone who has done nothing to deserve it. He can do it.
Yeah.
I don't think he felt great about it.
Well,
though.
and there's a difference. So you didn't see that look in the slightest when he killed, what was it, Fred Whalen at the
True.
like money
The travel wire
place. But this is different because this is one of his people.
Yeah, they even underlined the fact that he didn't care about Fred whenever they did the court scenes where he saw his fake family, then he looked over and he saw Fred's
"Who are
real
they?"
family who's definitely really upset that they lost their loved one, and he doesn't look to have any kind of connection to their pain, and he doesn't even really acknowledge it. It's just sort of like, oh well, too bad, that guy was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and that kind of stuff happens. So yeah, I agree with all of what you're saying there. I think that to jump ahead, this idea that he needs proof that Gus is working against the cartel is pretty fascinating. It's kind of hard to figure out where he goes from there. Initially, when I watched it, I thought that he was going to go after Nacho, but it doesn't seem like that's the case. What was your take on that?
Yeah, I initially the first time I watched it, when you see the car follow Jimmy and Kim at the end, I was like, "That's Lalo," and then I realized that makes absolutely no sense. The whole point is he decided to stay in Mexico. My next thought was, yeah, I mean, Nacho would be the guy who knows what really happened. Uh, but beyond that, I'm not really sure what kind of proof he could find. What kind of physical proof could he find that would convince Don Eladio or Bolsa that Gus was behind this? I don't know, Pete, did you have any speculation on that?
I do, but I don't know if I should talk about it now because it's kind of based on the teaser and some of the stuff
Okay.
that Peter Gould said. Yeah, but like I said, my initial take was similar to yours. When I first saw the car, I was like, "Wow, Nacho's already back in the U.S. This is crazy." I think we even talked about it, Gil, in a DM or something. But
Yep.
yeah, that doesn't seem to be the case. He doesn't seem to be going back, and he doesn't seem to be going after Nacho at all, because that's the thing, right? He's not just trying to get this scheme out. He's trying to show the cartel, his bosses, that Gus is ultimately working against them and that he's a liability. And even though he makes a ton of money that they are happy to take, they need to get rid of him. And, that's a whole different situation when you really think about it.
Well, and the ultimate betrayal of Gus against the cartel and like the broader organization is the fact that he's building this lab. And Lalo was this close to figuring it out. He knew about Werner. He was taking like meticulous notes on the comings and goings at the laundry. He just never fully put the pieces together or got any evidence. Then again, I don't know what staying in Mexico would do to help him prove anything about the lab. So I still don't think that's what the proof is related to, but we definitely haven't seen the last of that threat either.
Yeah, one other thing to think about is that he's wanted in the United States as Jorge de Guzman.
Mhm.
So that doesn't mean he can't go anywhere else. He just doesn't really it's really not a great idea for him to go to the US.
He just needs to grow out that beard.
Yeah, he needs to replace his body double.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ZZ Top, go full ZZ Top.
Yeah.
By the way, I should clarify, I see a few people who are put off by my statement that Lalo Salamanca is not evil. I guess I should clarify. What I mean is there's nobody on the show that is just chaotic evil, where they're just out to do horrible things and have no boundaries. So I think it's clear that Lalo didn't want to kill this guy, or at least didn't feel great about it. I don't think there's there's no serial killers on this show. I guess I'll say it that way.
Gus is the closest you'll get to that, I think. And when it comes to Lalo, I would say he's evil, but he also has some qualities that we like, such as loyalty to an extent, at least in an emotional sense, and very directly toward his immediate family. I wouldn't. I think consider being willing to die or put himself in extreme danger for Hector, for example.
Right.
That's someone he truly cares about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's just a good complicated character where he's obviously has evil. I mean, just think of Walter White, or like you said, Gus. They're bad people all the way around. What they do, they have a negative effect on the people around them, on the world as a whole. But you kind of understand why they do what they do, what they're thinking, and they have those moments when you're like, okay, there is some humanity in there. There are some things that I recognize in there that are, just like other people I know.
Mhm. I will go on record agreeing with QWERTY Manor. Todd was pretty evil, I thought.
He might be the most evil one on the show because he didn't even seem. At least Gus says, "I know what I am." I don't even think Todd understood how bad the things he was doing was,
Mhm.
and not in a way to defend him, but to say this is how messed up he was.
Yeah, he might. I mean, it's saying something to say that anyone is the worst, but
Yeah.
you might be onto something there. You might be onto something. So, anything else about Lalo you guys want to throw in there?
He's just such a fun character.
Yeah, he might be one of the best additions just in terms of like in some ways he's kind of the Gus of this series, where there have been a series of antagonists on both shows, but in both cases, Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, you walk away where when you think bad guy for Breaking Bad, you immediately think of Gus and then you think of a few other people. For me on Better Call Saul, if someone asked me who's the bad guy on that show, like Lalo would pop into my head. He's iconic. He's one of the iconic characters that have been introduced on this
And
show.
he's a bad guy that you enjoy watching. Like similar to Gus, I'm curious about him. I want to keep watching. Whereas if I think about the Nazis on Breaking Bad, who also made good villains, I'm less curious to say, I want to learn more about their lives or what they're up to. And similarly with like Tuco, he was a pretty good villain. And I think originally he was actually supposed to be a much larger villain on the show than he ended up being. But I'm not it's not like I'm craving to like see more of him and learn more about him. Whereas Lalo, like every time I see him, I'm like, oh man, I want to see more of this guy.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
this is oh sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, I was just gonna say that the Salamanca family, they're all so one note. You know what I mean? Like they just sort of, they're like Tuco is a hothead.
Yeah.
Hector was just incapacitated. Then we found out he's kind of incompetent and just not really the greatest criminal. He had a lot more mystique to him whenever he was incapacitated in the original series. But
Right.
Lalo brought that in, and he filled the hole that Chuck left behind, because that was a big question. That was so important in the first 3 seasons, and it still hangs over it. But that was the best thing that was going on, was this battle between Chuck and Jimmy. And whenever he's gone, Gus had emerged at that point, but we know what happens to him, and then the added stuff with him. I mean, I could take it or leave it. There's there's something to it, but it doesn't really compare to what we're watching on the other side of the story. So I think that Lalo really, he was a different kind of Salamanca, and he really injected some life into that side of the story.
Mhm. And I was just gonna say, if we want to close out the conversation on Lalo, of course he was invented kind of incidentally in Breaking Bad because of the one line, did
Yeah.
Lalo send you? So the fact that Saul says that, do you think that means, well, Lalo's got to be alive? Or the fact that Gus tells Hector, with you, the Salamanca family ends, essentially. Do we know if he's alive or not? Or do you think it's just a total open book at this point?
I mean, I think Gus is the more reliable source. I mean, his whole life is knowing and trying to punish the Salamanca family, and everything that's related to Hector. If he believes he's dead, there's got to be a good reason that he believes that, if it's not true.
Especially because we see Gus realize that Lalo survived.
Right.
Right?
It
Yeah.
would be kind of
He
funny
goes
if he
from
like,
that to thinking he's dead now later. So
right, he faked his death, thought he was dead, then figured out he's alive, and then once again thinks he's dead. It would be a little, would be a little bit of a bizarre story choice.
Oh, and that brings up something I was thinking about, and I guess we won't move on from Lalo just yet. It's interesting that that I mentioned before how I thought it was a good idea how they remind us how brutal he can be, how complicated he can be, and then to think about it, I had a couple people bring this up in some of my comments about, it's wild that Hector knows that he tried to do this. I mean, that's pretty much, he can put that together. Lalo told him that, and you know what I mean? Like, this is way before this relationship comes to a close. And so throughout this story from this point on, Hector knows that Gus had tried to kill Lalo at this point. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, it's one of the things this show has given us that I really enjoy is the kind of different way to look at the relationship between Gus and the Salamancas. We knew Gus wanted revenge, but I love the fact that we find out that that desire for revenge is almost like pathological. The whole story about the Kawati. So there's been a few examples of just adding more nuance to the whole revenge plot and the relationship between Gus Fring and the Salamancas.
Yeah, I guess we could just skip to Gus right now since we brought him up, because I think, in the overall, I think what I thought about Gus before I saw what they added in Better Call Saul was I thought that he was just completely impenetrable. I mean, he was just down to everything was calculated. It was for a reason. He was some kind of mastermind in a way that didn't involve being a sociopath. You know what I mean? Like, I felt like it was strictly business, and it changed as time went on. And that's what I thought was really interesting about this Gus part of the story in this first couple of episodes, was seeing him where things aren't working out. He's supposed to be the most calculating man in the Breaking Bad universe. I think I've heard Peter Gould say that he's the smartest man. And, I would say, what about Walter and that? But, plenty went wrong for both of these characters either way. But I mean, Gus is, he's shook at this point, and that made it so that people were, a lot of people were asking about why he did what he did here. It's kind of hard to follow what he's trying to accomplish with Nacho and the safe and everything else that was going on.
Right. Do we? Yeah. Just but before we get into the logistics of what happened there, I will say the moment of Gus knocking over that glass, like you alluded to, seeing Gus when things aren't going exactly according to plan. Again, just a simple action to show us how nervous he is. I thought that was so effective.
Yeah, it was super, super. I mean, it just didn't feel right at all. You know what I mean? You're like, wait, that's Gus. How can that happen? It felt like we got to pay attention to this. This is important.
Right. Like, it was uncomfortable to watch it happen and to see him bend over to clean it up. And then the point where he says, continue.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's take a short detour here. I want to thank Ian Feebig for the $5. He said, I totally missed the body double thing. Thanks for sharing in the video. Yeah, a lot of people had that reaction. I kind of picked up on it in the trailer whenever I did the trailer breakdown. I thought that was the most likely thing that was going on there. So I was looking for it going into it, but I think it's supposed to be the kind of thing that you put together when it comes in waves. You hear about you see what's happening, then you hear about the dental work, then that comes up again later. It's sort of like a 3-step reveal kind of thing where you get little pieces as it develops and goes on. So definitely thank you for that $5. I think we have another one here too. Richard O'Brien, thank you for the $4.99. He says Gus will kill Lalo before the cartel finds out he survived the Hacienda massacre, revealing the dramatic irony of Hector being the only one to know. Yeah, that's what I was kind of touching on, that he's always going to know that. He's always got the back, in the back of his mind while he's sitting there at the old folks' home. Do you guys have anything you want to add to that?
That would be dramatic and ironic if it played out that way. I like that idea. Yeah.
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 Yeah. I think that's totally plausible.
Yeah. So thank you again for the super chat. We have another one here we'll get to before we jump back in. A red wheelbarrow. I guess that is a Mr. Robot, maybe a Mr. Robot reference. I believe Nacho was set up to die and have the cartel barely miss taking him alive. Mike was able to step in and try his way once Nacho managed to get out alive. Well, yes, he was certainly set up to die. He was supposed to die specifically in a shootout. That was the whole thing with Tyrus giving him that information to shoot if anyone comes in the door. Mike was able to step in and try his way once Nacho managed to get out alive. I don't think we've seen that yet.
Well, I think this is a good time to kind of similar to the Lalo body double thing. I think this is another part of the 2 episodes that required a lot of dot connecting. So I think what Red Wheelbarrow is referring to here is, so first off, let's talk about the logistics of what was happening with the safe and everything. So basically, Nacho is a big loose end because if the cartel or the Salamancas find him and get him to talk, now they find out that Gus is the one who tried to assassinate Lalo. So for Gus, he wants Nacho dead, but he doesn't want anyone to know that he's the one who killed him and he's the one trying to tie up loose ends. So
yeah, because in that, I just wanted to add that, Bolsa kind of threatens him a little bit on his phone call whenever he's talking about it, right? So he's made it a point that they want this guy alive, but at that point he's already sort of, things are in motion. So it's a little bit, he can't really just act decisively.
right.
Right.
And he
if
tells
the
Gus,
Salamancas themselves kill Nacho, there's no question to ask after that because clearly Nacho's the one who betrayed them. So no one's going to be like, well, he was a double agent working for them.
And to your point, Pete, Bolsa said to Gus, everyone is under suspicion right now. He said it as a warning, but you can also take it as Gus, we're not exactly, we're not accusing you of anything, but we're also not turning a blind eye.
And from our perspective, like we've seen so much of what Gus is up to that it just feels so obvious that like it's hard to believe that other people don't know for a fact that Gus was behind this.
Right.
But we have to keep in mind that we've seen so much more than what anyone else knows.
To everyone else, he's just the chicken man.
Yeah.
But how's Gus going to get the Salamancas to kill Nacho? So that's where he sends Mike to Nacho's house, breaks into the safe, transfers all of its contents into a brand new safe, but slips an envelope in there. So that way, when the Salamancas and Bolsa come into the Nacho's house and they break into the safe, they find the envelope and they think they've found Nacho's escape route. They see the phone number for the motel where he's staying while he's waiting to be rescued. So
and they're also they're all transfers from a Peruvian bank, and it's everything in there points to another country entirely.
Exactly. So the Salamancas and Bolsa will be going to find Nacho. Meanwhile, Tyrus has told Nacho if anybody shows up, shoot at them. So even if the Salamancas are trying to take him alive, if Nacho starts shooting, they're going to take him out. So that's
what we saw happen,
Yeah, exactly. And so to Red Wheelbarrow's point, I think Mike accepted Nacho's going to die. When he transfers the contents of the case, you see that he puts Nacho's fake ID into the new safe, but he pockets Nacho's father. So he's giving up on Nacho, but he's still drawing a hard line for Nacho's father. When Nacho calls Mike, he doesn't pick up the phone, and then he sits down and looks kind of disturbed. So the way I'm reading all of that is Mike has essentially given up. Nacho's in the game. It's up to him now to survive. But once Nacho gets away, like we see at the end of episode 2, now Mike has a chance to try and step in and save Nacho. He tells Gus, give me 4 guys. I'm going to go in and rescue him. Before Gus can give an answer, of course, Mike gets a call from Nacho. Nacho says he wants to talk to Gus, and that's where we leave things. So we don't know what's going to happen, but it does seem like Mike thinks that he does have an opportunity to potentially save Nacho at this point.
What do you think? Oh, go ahead.
Or go ahead, Adam.
Well, I was just wondering, what do you think Nacho wants to say? Do you think he has some kind of bargaining chip up his sleeve or some idea of something he can say to prove his value and that he's still better off alive than eliminated?
I mean, that's the thing that's really kind of bothering me about the Nacho thing is, like, I don't really understand. I mean, I get that he's getting pulled back and forth between these 2 different factions that neither one of them have anything good in mind for him at this point. but I just don't really see, besides Mike, I really don't see how anyone advocates for him or where he go. Like, what can he has no leverage or anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think, one of the things I love about Nacho this season is that we've just seen him bouncing back and forth, following orders from Gus, and we haven't gotten to see him act independently. Now we're finally getting to see that. Him sneaking into the other building, calling Tyrus to get them to call the guy watching him to prove that he's working for Gus was clever. So we're seeing how smart Nacho is. We already knew that, but now we're getting to see him act independently. We're really getting to see what he's capable of. And I don't know what he's going to say to Gus, but I'm hoping whatever it is, it's impressive and surprising, and we really get to see what Nacho's made of.
Yeah, just real quick, what I was going to say about the Mike situation is the way I look at it. Mike, he made his case, but he's able to accept it based on his own code about, Nacho made his choices. He's in the game. Sometimes stuff happens, you know what I mean? Where I see him really drawing the line is with Papa Varga. Whenever he says, if anybody's going to go after him, you're going to have to come through me. Like, I feel like that is just because he's an innocent. He's a civilian. He has nothing to do with anything, and he shouldn't have to deal with the sins of his father or his son, in this case, right? And there's a kind of a connection between Mike and his own son in that situation. And, I think that there is, I think that's really where he might actually go against his boss, because otherwise I think Mike is he'll say what he thinks, he'll do what he wants to do. But when it comes to Gus, I mean, he shot Burner, who he cared a lot more about, I think, than Nacho. And you know what I mean? I think that he understood that, because you know what, Burner went to work for a very crazy criminal and had this stupid idea to run away and see his wife after Mike told him not to just give that idea up, right? So I think that that's really where he might draw the line, is with Nacho's father. But he'll if we have to see if he has to see him be a sacrifice, he has to see Nacho be a sacrifice, then he could live with that.
Well, and the thing I love about Mike's character is he has a very consistent and understandable sense of justice, even if it's not the kind of justice ordinary people think about. It's still consistent, and he makes a clear divide between the criminal and the non-criminal world. And I can only imagine that that feeling of justice and the pursuit of justice is probably what drew him to law enforcement in the first place, and it turned out to be just as crooked as the world he entered afterward.
And
Yeah.
ironically, where right now we essentially see Mike letting go and saying maybe Nacho's going to die here because he's in the game, I was trying to trace back, when is the first time we actually hear Mike use that phrase in the game? And it's shortly after he hears it from Nacho back in season 2, when Mike robs the Salamanca's truck and leaves the driver tied up on the side of the road. Nacho says to Mike, anybody in the game would have capped the guy without a second thought. Somebody left him alive, so I knew it had to be you. And then a few episodes later, when Gus is asking Mike why he wants to kill Hector, and Mike essentially says Hector killed that Good Samaritan. He wasn't in the game. So it's not said explicitly, but it seems to me he picked up that phrase from Nacho. That's where he kind of learned this moral code of, you know what? People in the game sometimes do have to die. And now Nacho is kind of on the other side of that from Mike. He's sort of the victim now.
Yeah. And just a little off topic, it's also funny that whenever we were rewatching, we were talking about how Nacho, how that was his kind of his role with Jimmy in the first season, where Jimmy didn't see his situation for what it actually was. But, Nacho said, hey, give me a call when you realize you're in this, when you're in the game or whatever, which is a nice recurring deal there with that idea. Real quick, Tim H, thank you for the $4.99. He says we never actually saw Nacho escape. Chances he's now under Lalo's thumb. Like I said earlier, I don't think Lalo is immediately concerned about him. I think that the cousins are going after Nacho. You're right about the fact that we didn't see him escape. We do hear on the phone that they found Nacho's truck, but they didn't find him. So he's out there in the countryside somewhere.
Yeah, and I think I can't imagine Nacho truly being under anyone's thumb at this point. He's been backstabbed so many times. So even if somehow he ends up interacting with Lalo and going along with him, I have to imagine that Nacho will always be scheming in the background. And I think he's trying to no longer be the victim. He needs to start striking back. And if he goes back into that kind of victim role where he's just gun to his father's head, so he has to do whatever Gus says or whatever Lalo says, it'll kind of be like treading over familiar ground. So I think from a storytelling perspective, we have to see Nacho fighting back and doing something clever to just no longer be under people's thumb.
I'm very curious to see how his plot goes, because I can't imagine a way that he can go on the offensive and not just assume that that's going to kill his father, which I think he would not accept any course of action that he knows would cause his father to get killed.
It does make it super complicated for him. And his only other thing is death by torture. Those are his two options.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Get my dad killed or get myself killed slowly by, whatever. I mean, I'm sure he understands who the cousins are, who they are as people. Yeah. I think the reputation kind of, precedes them. So that's all real stuff that he's doing. And his whole situation, it was a little bit, it wasn't like grab you, it wasn't the most exciting stuff, but it really worked well because, I kept thinking about this, like, there's nothing there. There's no distraction. All you're doing is you're just stuck in this room waiting. And all you're thinking about are these people coming from you, and the fact that you got double crossed, and the fact that there's nowhere you can go. And it's just so intense. And only thing he can really do is just sit there and put it together and solve the puzzle on this like super basic level. Like, what's going on outside my window? What's going on? What do I need to be watching out for? What can I do if this happens? It's super intense. Like I said, it's not like thrilling until the actual, gunfight breaks out or whatever. But when you think back on it, can you imagine being there, sitting in that room?
No, I mean, yeah, I could sit in a room for a while if I have my laptop, get some writing done, that sort of thing. But if I'm constantly wondering if someone's coming to shoot me, that would probably be a mild distraction. But it was tense. I mean, it was sort of the ticking time bomb where every time we cut to Nacho, as always, he's looking nervous as ever. So you just feel that you can't not look at him, or you can't look at him and just not also feel somewhat nervous. But every time
no air conditioner, so he's sweating his ass off the whole time.
That's right. So every time someone comes to the door, you just don't know what's going to happen. So very tense scenes.
I mean, and how is he even supposed to trust the food that's being put out there?
Right.
Yeah, it's all a nightmare. It's a living nightmare after he ran miles to get there. You know what I mean? Through the dark. Because we know the character and we're just curious what happens next. I think you can kind of overlook that a little bit, but it's an insane situation that he finds himself in. So I guess we kind of touched on Gus and Mike. Is there anything with those two that you want to bring up before we move on and talk about our favorite couple here?
I just want to add with Mike that when he stood up to Gus at the end of episode 2, drawing that hard line to protect Nacho's father, that was such a gratifying moment. I feel like on this show, when we're always in the kind of moral gray area, you can never just outright root for someone. When we're watching Jimmy and Kim go after Howard, it's fun to watch how that plan unfolds, but constantly in the back of your mind, you're a little bit worried about Howard and where they're going to go with that. But here, this is one of the rare occasions where we can all look at this and say, Nacho's father does not deserve to die or get pulled into this in any way, shape, or form. So to see Mike stand up to Gus with a gun in his face and just stone-faced tell them, this is not going to happen the way you think. It was a badass moment, and it just felt so gratifying to see him draw that hard line and like you said, stand up for Papa Varga.
And how crazy is it that we absolutely know that neither one of these characters, anything's going to happen to either of them at this point in the story? You know what I mean? Like, it's amazing how how many things they have to do right in a scene to make it feel that intense, even though we know that what's going to happen later with these characters, you know?
Well, and it's not like it's a fake tension or they're trying to fool us into thinking that, oh, what if Mike dies here? Because everyone knows he's not. And you can even see on his face, does that look like the face of a man who's really that afraid? Like I think he's just doing what feels right and he's standing up. He's already said whether he lives or he dies doesn't really make a difference to him.
Mhm.
And like down to the core, like the actor behind him, I think really feels that and is conveying it perfectly.
Yeah, sometimes the Mike story can feel a little disconnected, and sometimes it really, it really just brings a kind of humanity that we don't always get in other characters, and I think this is kind of the latter, where he's caught up. I mean, he's obviously an operator. He's obviously very good at what he does. We know he goes along with it, but there's that one thing that still kind of makes him a little different than everyone else in his world. So, anything else on Mike or Gus?
I think that's it for me.
Yep.
All right. So obviously, I just kind of want to finish up with Kim because she's the most fascinating. So let's go to Jimmy first. And you know, I listened to the I think it was in the Insider podcast, and they said that this episode was kind of about Jimmy getting his mojo back or coming back. And I don't think I actually put that together in that way when I was watching it live. But I mean, I was very conscious of how broken he is. He's just in pieces from the end of season 5 in the beginning. And I got to say, I think you already touched on this, Adam, that, seeing him come back to life in the country club, that was just something that, man, it was just, I don't know. Like I said, I watched this and, I didn't really have much, I guess, I kind of figured that I've kind of had a little bit of suspicion about this idea of scamming Howard because they're the most likely people to do it. Jimmy is, you know what I mean? Like, I can't see how Howard doesn't see this coming, and it's coming from them. But I'm able to suspend that disbelief when it comes to how much fun it was watching Bob
Yeah.
Odenkirk slip into this in this actual scene here.
Well, it's like watching a star athlete like improvise on the field and do something really just dazzling.
Right. In terms of talking your way out of a tough situation, he's an Olympic athlete.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, did you guys think that this was staged, like he was planning on seeing Kevin Wachtell, or this is a complete audible? Because I thought it was a complete audible.
I agree with that.
Yeah, that's how I saw it. And I think it could be a big problem because they don't want Howard or anyone to know that Jimmy was there. And if Kevin talks to Howard at all, I feel like that's probably going to come up. And Jimmy made a big scene. It wasn't even just Kevin, but so many people saw him.
Yeah, it was actually really ill-advised, and that's why I was saying I'm willing to suspend a little bit of disbelief, and we don't know how they're going to end up writing it in the end, but like, these people talk to each other. They're an elite circle of people. That's the whole point of the country club, right? Is that you go there and you're only around people that are also paying to be there, and it kind of keeps everyone else out. So there's that whole dynamic, and yeah, this is something that people would talk about. I mean, he's shouting at the top of his lungs, talking about it's all mayonnaise or whatever. Wall-to-wall mayonnaise, I think is what it was, wasn't it?
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah. Saul Goodman already also, it's not like he just has a kind of a crappy reputation with Howard now. It's like he worked for Cliff Maine and made an ass of himself there too. So even though Maine is a little perturbed by what he's seeing with Howard and he's kind of trying to connect these dots and he's wondering, oh, I don't know, maybe Howard is on the devil's dandruff. As soon as he learns that Saul was there that day, I mean, that's gonna cause a big problem.
Even before learning that Saul was there that day, I mean, last season, Jimmy threw bowling balls at his car,
Yeah.
had prostitutes interrupt a lunch.
Well, that's the other thing. Cliff Main was there for that, and it's all it could all add up. Okay, so either this person I thought I knew really well turns out to be some kind of person with an addiction who's seeing a bunch of prostitutes, or Saul Goodman is acting like the person I know he is.
Well, Cliff, I think, has less experience with Jimmy, so I don't necessarily. I could see him falling for this, but I could also just as easily see Howard suspecting Jimmy pretty quickly. Who planted these drugs here? I feel like the first person he'd suspect is Jimmy.
And this is something the show's good at. Like one of the things I loved about rewatching season 2 was seeing how Jimmy underestimated Cliff Main in that whole situation. Like he's thinking, I'm doing all this crazy stuff, he's going to fire me. What Cliff didn't think, like, this guy's such a piece of work that I got rid of him. He's like, this guy is trying to get fired, so I might as well just give him what he wants because it's easier for me than having to deal with this all the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, they don't make people stupid just to make them stupid, so I've been saying this since I watched the very first trailer, that I feel like they have to be anticipating how Howard's going to respond and playing, steps ahead. Like they know he's going to come on to them, and then that's all part of their plan, because I don't see how they really make this work otherwise. Like Kim and Jimmy are too smart and Howard's too smart. So they can't just say, oh, well, we thought it'd be a great idea to continue these pranks that are ongoing, that Howard just told her about this like 2 days ago in the show's timeline about Jimmy throwing the bowling balls and sending the prostitutes. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see how that moves forward from there.
Yeah, I have a suspicion that there's more to this plan than we realize. It's not going to be as simple as we set up Howard to look like a drug addict, and that's pretty much it. Because it was very blatant that when Jimmy and Kim were discussing the plan, we didn't get to hear it.
Yeah.
So I think there's going to be. I mean, it could be something like Howard starts accusing Jimmy of trying to manipulate events to ruin his life.
Well, that was like one of the things that was Chuck's downfall, was his need to try to clear his name and to accuse Saul of the things he actually was doing. And so if they can kind of goad Howard into retaliation, or at least publicly going after him or accusing him, it could come back to bite him.
Right. If there are enough events manipulated, like putting baby powder in his locker, to anybody who doesn't know Jimmy and what he's capable of, Howard would sound insane with his accusations. And that's exactly what I was thinking about, is Chuck, because that's what happened to him when he was in front of the board hearing and he started saying the thing with the billboard, Jimmy faked that, and he was pulling the strings here. He's behind everything. It makes him look insane, even though everything he said is true. Yeah. So there could be something similar happening with Hamlin here.
Yeah, I mean, that was my take from the start, was that, if you look back at a lot of the scams that he ran with Marco, a lot of them are setups where the Mark thinks that they're driving the action. Yeah. They're basically playing right into their hands, but they think that they're getting over on Jimmy and Marco, only for the roles to be reversed. And, it plays out that way. And I think that that's what's going on with Kim and Jimmy, and would be pretty surprised. I mean, I'm pretty married to the idea at this point, you know what I mean? But we'll see how they do that. Another thing that I liked here, whenever, like I said, Jimmy's kind of in pieces at the beginning. He's definitely not 100% on board with what's going on with her ideas about going after Howard. And I like the way that you saw that he can't really go against her either. Like he's definitely got some turmoil there of, like, if you think about it, and this may turn out to be really devastating and tragic later, but he's kind of at the place that he would always have wanted to be, right? He's got the wife, he's got the woman at his side. She's finally, they had some distance in between them at times. She's finally on board. She's finally fired up about doing things that he's really good about doing. And it's not necessarily what, it's sort of one of those situations. careful what you wish for. What do you guys think about that?
I agree with that. I think the tables are starting to turn, and whereas before it was Saul who was leading the way with all of these schemes and all this gray area activity, um, Kim's a quick learner and she can be very devious, and I think she's starting to get ahead of him.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think I mean, it says it all when Jimmy gets back in the car after Kim faces down the Kettlemans and he says to himself, wolves and sheep.
Yeah.
And that's, of course, a callback to the flashback we saw either in season 1 or 2, I can't remember, where Jimmy
I think it's
basically
season 2.
okay, I think that's right. Where Jimmy is at his father's corner store. He watches his father get scammed over and over again. And one of the grifters turns to Jimmy and says, well, there are wolves and sheep in this world. Figure out which one you're going to be. And so I think in this moment, Jimmy thought he was on his way to becoming a wolf, but now he sees that Kim she's a wolf. She makes him look like, what did you say?
A little puppy.
Yeah, something like that.
A
Yeah.
labradoodle.
Yeah, I think it's pretty fascinating stuff, and we'll come back to her, and I want to circle around back to that wolves and sheep idea. So definitely keep that in mind, because there's a lot of like big picture questions that revolve around that, and I was really like, whoa, whenever he said that, because I'm not even sure what we're supposed to think about that, but I don't want to get too derailed at this point, because you mentioned the Kettlemans, and man, was that not like, this is actually something that got spoiled for me, because when I got the email, I saw the do not the do not disclose list, and it said don't mention the Kettlemans, and I was like, oh, now I know the Kettlemans are going to be, but I could not have, even knowing it going into it, man, there was that not the like perfect return character situation here. I mean, I never get tired of Betsy's inability to play the victim, to really believe it, to sell it,
Yeah.
and just be able to completely overlook it. I mean, they are criminals. They're absolutely criminals. They're dirty. Craig went to jail and got back out, and they went straight back to the grind of ripping off vulnerable people.
And meanwhile, Craig is so friendly and nice and likable and meek.
Yeah,
and
when
she just walks all over him.
I cracked up at the Mazel Tov line when he congratulates them for getting married.
Yeah.
And then laughed even more when he tells Kim, oh, press 9 to dial out.
Yeah. Well, she's in the process of threatening them.
They do such a good job on this show of, they know they need characters to fulfill a certain role. And then they look at their array of existing characters, and if they have an existing character that organically makes sense there and can do what they need them to do, they'll bring them in. And I think because they use that method, these reappearances that we're so happy to see just as fans, they never feel like fan service. They always feel thematically appropriate, and just they don't feel like they break the reality of the show. It feels organic.
Yeah, I mean, as an idea, it sounds like, why would these people fit back in? But they made it work. You know what I mean? They put it together in a way where it's believable to me that Kim might have found out about them. She might have looked into what they were up to. I mean, she ended up in doc review in the basement because of them, because they wouldn't listen to her and they left. So they're definitely people that she would remember. And if Craig got out of jail, then it's very possible that she might kind of loosely keep an eye on what they were up to and what they were doing. And yeah, you guys were saying, like, obviously Betsy kind of runs the show, but it only works as good as it does because Craig, the character who plays him, I mean, this guy is a master brow furrower. Like, the way that he can just switch, like he's standing there, he's waiting. He's 100% like excited to see Jimmy.
Yeah.
But he's also trained to know that he follows what his wife, he looks to her for the clues of what he's going to do. That's, I mean, obviously we don't see them behind closed doors, but we can imagine what that is like. You know what I mean? Like, he definitely gets led around by whatever she wants to have happen. So yeah, the actor really nails the facial expressions and the way that he shifts from being like completely happy to completely concerned. And just doesn't look like he has a feeling of his own. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he just repurposes anything at a drop of a hat.
You know, the show does a great job squeezing comedic relief out of people who are kind of caught in between identities. So especially when it comes to these people who are criminals, but they're not hardened criminals. They're kind of soft criminals. They're like white collar sort of criminals. And the Kettlemans kind of remind me of the guy who was selling pharmaceutical drugs on
Daniel
the side.
Wormold.
Yeah, and he was like,
Mhm.
my cards, you know, and he wanted to call the police because the things he paid for with stolen money were stolen from him.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. I mean, that's what makes them as good as they are too. That's a big part of it, is how they really don't see what they're doing as bad. You know, they're not bad like how Jimmy's bad, or they're not bad how Nacho's bad, or Gus or Lalo or anybody else. They're just, they just deserve a little bit more, and they figured out a way to get it, and nobody should bother them for wanting to send their kids to private school.
Yeah.
I think they do self-justify in a little bit of the same way that Jimmy does. If you remember the Kettlemans back in season 1, Betsy kept saying, Craig earned that money. He worked so hard and essentially just didn't get what he deserved. It's almost like the world was already screwing us over, so this is just kind of balancing the scales. And I think it's not exactly the same as the way Jimmy sees the world, but if you do think of the world as wolves and sheep, the basic idea is that if you don't take advantage of other people, then they're going to be taking advantage of you. So it's kind of like, I'm not doing anything wrong. I have to do this because that's the world we live in.
Yeah, and it's funny because they're suburban, they're white bread, and you know what I mean. It's funny to think, and I mean, I think that is, that there's a lot of that happens across the board. People, like, you kind of think about like lawyers as a profession. You know what I mean? Not all lawyers are bad, but many lawyers do things that they would. I mean, they're. I don't want to make anybody feel bad, but you know what I'm saying. Like, we're all the hero of our own story, right? And some of us like to bend the rules and don't think that it is as bad as what other people are doing. It's just a part of how people operate.
Well, you feel like your reasons for it are valid
Right.
compared to other people's.
And the best way to make yourself feel bad about, or feel good about, that is to look at how bad other people are,
Yeah.
how bad their reasons are. You don't have to look at your own. So that's why, Saul is the kind of lawyer that guilty people hire,
Yeah.
which is exactly them.
That's right.
But they don't want to hire him because, it doesn't fit their personal image. So I don't know if you have anything, but you can bring it up when we get into Kim, because like I said, I think, this is the most fascinating thing that's happening right now. One thing from the opener I took away from it was that she is nowhere near that Saul Goodman mansion at that point. She definitely is not in Jimmy's life behind the scenes whenever he goes home at night from being Walter White's lawyer. Are you guys in agreement with that?
So I initially was, and then I thought about it some more on my second watch through of these episodes, and then I wasn't so sure, because we see that Kim is the one who questions the car that Jimmy is driving. Oh, Saul Goodman drives a brown Ford? Shouldn't he drive something flashier? And then she's also the one who says, we also need to find Saul Goodman a nicer office. So I could see her pushing for, we need to craft the image of Saul Goodman. Now, yeah, go ahead.
Don't forget, she's also the one who stands up to Lalo when he walks into their home. And that, that's from last season, but they're showing like she's got some more confidence than Saul seems to have lately.
Mhm.
And kind of a really good sharp head on her shoulders for this stuff.
Exactly. So those were kind of the two things that made me think there is a chance that she's around. One, yes, that was over the top decadence, but maybe she would have pushed for that to help craft the Saul Goodman image. Now, I'm not so sure, because that is his private residence, and ideally you wouldn't be bringing cartel leaders or criminals that you're representing to your house. but you may have company over at some point and you want to maintain that Saul Goodman image. And then to your point, we see that Kim is the one that knows when to pull out the stick when the carrot's not going to work. And that seems like something that Saul Goodman would know how to do. So maybe Jimmy's just learning it from her and then he carries it along as he becomes Saul Goodman. Or maybe she's continuing to push him. She doesn't get her hands dirty, but she will in the background advise Saul Goodman. So I'm not certain about that, but I did consider it as a possibility the second time I watched these episodes.
I'll say this, gun to my head.
Mhm.
I would say she's not there anymore. But we have slightly more reason to believe maybe she is than we did before. Or we at least have that gap just hasn't been filled in at all before. And now there's a few more dots to interpret.
I think she's pushing for it. I mean, I think that part is clear, but I don't think that that really backs up the idea that she would still be there or that she would actually join in that. You know what I mean? Like, I think that seems more like a reaction to the way things went than the natural conclusion of this conversation that they're having at the El Camino diner. And you know what I mean? Like, I mean, there doesn't really seem to be a lot of her there. There seems to be, stuff that he kept that was important to him and not so much the other way around. And I would be really surprised if that's what happened. Like that's their house that they share. I mean, I'm not saying that it's not possible that they didn't at one time, but to me, I don't see. I see her memory there. I see the influence of whatever happened to them there, but not her person.
Right.
That makes
Yeah,
sense.
we see a lot of mementos from Jimmy's life. You know, we see like the hat he wore in the Saul Goodman commercial where he's standing in front of the satellites, the CC mobile stress balls. We don't see, there's a letter that Kim received from one of her clients that she always looks at when she wants to think about the real work she wants to do, representing people who need justice and can't afford it. We don't see anything like that. Really, the only thing we see that we know was important to her was the stopper, which, could have just been Jimmy holding on to it for the memory of Kim.
There is the question of the thong hanging from the
That's true.
faucet. That's the one thing.
Again, you know what I mean? Like they went to the point of showing that he has Viagra there and
It's true. So, yeah,
minoxidil or whatever it's called, the hair regrowth stuff. Like it to me, it just seemed like it's more of a situation where they're showing that this guy, is trying to be something. He's trying to be something that isn't, all that recognizable from what we've been seeing as Jimmy McGill.
Yeah. Or he's trying to he's covering up for some things that have left.
Right. If he lost Kim and now he's trying to fill that void in his life with just
that would be my take.
One of my favorite fan theories, which is certainly it's sort of a joke meme fan theory, is that Kim becomes Wendy.
Yeah.
In Breaking Bad.
I have laughed at that. I have laughed at that one many times too. I would be disappointed if they did go that way, but it is funny. It is a funny idea. So one of the things that I thought about, I think that we saw that Kim is still this idea of her being a force for good, to be able to help people, to do pro bono all the time. We see her beaming in the beginning whenever she's talking to Jimmy about that. That part is all very real, like that's really what's driving her decisions here. Like she has a reason that she thinks is a good one. And this other stuff that's going to have to happen now, it makes sense inside her, inside, because it's a means to the end. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, she basically her plan with the money that they get from the Sandpiper settlement is to open up a great practice where they can give the best representation to people who typically couldn't afford it. I mean, it's the Robin Hood idea.
Yeah.
And I do think she believes that, and I do think there is definitely good in her heart, and she absolutely means it. I mean, you see how much pleasure she gets from what Jimmy thinks sounds like a horrible day, but it was the best professional day of her life, and she had to add the word professional.
Yeah.
So that was really that may have been the best day of her life. So I genuinely believe all of that. But it's trying to have your cake and eat it too. I mean, it's what Mike accuses Gus of in Dedicato a Max, trying to do some good to balance the scales for all the bad you do. Can you do that? Kim's trying to. But
Yeah.
what's going to happen when I mean, if Howard fights back and pushes her into a corner, what's going to happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it was pretty apparent that she had this scammy side that was under the surface. You know, we saw that come out. The question then is this something that she's always had? Or I mean, in the Breaking Bad universe, you know, the Vince Gilligan universe, you kind of think that that's probably the case, right? If we see this coming out right now, that she's really into she's really exhilarated by scamming people, that that's really driving her and getting her caught up, then that's probably that's probably always been there,
Mhm.
and it's just coming out, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a complicated. I don't know that it always necessarily would have manifested as she likes to scam people, but it definitely comes from something that's been inside her for a long time.
Yeah, I guess that's sort of what I'm saying is, do you think that scamming has been a part of her life before we got to this point, and she sort of reversed roles and became straight,
Hmm.
and now we see her backsliding. Do you think that's the case, or do you think this is just opening up a part of her that wasn't there, or that she wasn't aware of?
I think she's had sort of a dark, quasi self-destructive streak, um, probably forever, that has just gradually evolved and taken shape into scamming, and it would have probably turned into something else had she not met Jimmy. And like one thing I think about is like early scenes of Kim when we see flashbacks of her and when she was still a law student. And the scenes where she and Jimmy are just kind of in the parking garage smoking cigarettes, for example, like that's something they do in the shadows. It's not something they really want associated with their
Mhm.
professional identity, and it's sort of a miniature version of where her character goes.
Yeah,
Yeah, no,
that's a
I
good
agree with
point.
all that. Yeah.
I saw a really interesting interview in the LA Times, and they talked to both Peter Gould and Ray Seahorn, and they were talking about this last moment of the whenever she looked upset because Jimmy gave the Kettlemans the money,
Mhm.
and I had some people. My thought is that was, that had put her off, that she wasn't, she didn't feel good about that, that there was something about that was, troubling to her. And I had some people push back in the comments about that they thought that wasn't the case. What was your take on that? Did you guys pick up on that?
I saw it more as she was almost amused because I think the reason she decided to go to the meeting is because she asks Jimmy, "You're going to use the stick, right?" And he says, "No, he's going to offer them money, use the carrot." And that's when she
Yeah, that's
decides to
true.
go.
That's definitely true. The reason why she went.
Right? So I think she has this idea that Jimmy is a little bit of a softie and can't go as hard at these people as he needs to. So when he proves that to be the case by giving them the money, she's kind of laughing at him, saying, I knew you didn't have it in
Called it.
you. Yeah, I
Yeah.
called it. That's essentially how I saw it. Um, I, I know she has good reason to hate the Kettlemans and be disgusted with them. I think it was very purposeful that when they were walking in, she sees an elderly woman walking out, somebody very vulnerable, and she knows that this
Mhm.
person's getting taken advantage of. The exact kind of person that she would want to represent in court. The Kettlemans are taking advantage of her. But I also
Yeah.
think, yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
And I was just gonna say, I think the overriding emotion in that moment when Jimmy came out was amusement. I don't think the money will do that much to kind of save the Kettlemans from the tough situation they've put them in anyway. So I don't think she sees it. I don't think she looks at it with a lot of disgust. It was more just amusement in that moment.
Right, and that was the point that people had brought up, and I started to second guess myself, and then I saw this interview in the LA Times yesterday, and Ray Seahorn said, when she was asked about it, she said, "Kim has gotten into the dangerous business of thinking that she's the arbiter of what people deserve at this point.
Mhm.
She doesn't like that Jimmy's being soft with the Kettlemans. It's a very dark moment for her." So that's something to think
Right.
about.
She thinks they don't deserve to be treated with the carrot.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so that does bother her that Jimmy does this. So um it's I mean, I think this is a fascinating idea, this idea of her being the arbiter of what people deserve. And there's she went on to say that, you know, when you cross that line of where you think you're the person who can make those decisions, things can get a little bit off the rails, right?
Yeah, it's like I mean, A, you may be right or wrong when you're deciding somebody does or doesn't deserve something. But B, there could be real consequences to that. Like I think we're going to see with Howard. Because
Eh,
if you decide someone does or doesn't deserve something and then try to act on that, you're not always going to be able to get away with it.
Yeah, and you're giving yourself permission to, to make decisions for people, to
Right.
make, put people in situations where they're going to experience consequences. And, nobody really, that's not something that individual people are,
I mean, that's
eh,
what the law is for, right?
Right.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's
Yeah.
not something that people are good at being unbiased and fair and not getting their own personality mixed up in the situation. I think let's look at these. We had a couple of super chats. Andrew Loden, thank you for the $5. He said, "What if Kim is the opposite of Jimmy Saul outside home? She's pure Jimmy behind the scenes. At home, she is flashy, Saul, and pushes him on." What do you guys might be more? I mean, I think I kind of already touched on what I thought there. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, well, I think we essentially talked about this earlier, where I didn't think this was a possibility until I sort of rewatched the episodes and thought about it, seeing Kim push for Jimmy to get a flashier car, get the Saul Goodman office. I still wouldn't bet my money on this. I agree with you. Like at the end of the day, I would still bet on Kim not being there. But I think it's a
Yeah.
possibility.
I also don't think Kim herself is flashy. She's sort of saying Saul has started to adopt this flashy persona. He's doing the finger guns and he wears these gaudy suits and everything. So she's helping flesh out the character. But it's not like her own person. I don't think the gold toilet is actually her own personal taste.
Yeah,
Agreed.
and I think that that kind of brings up something that I had mentioned in my video. I think that this is you start to look like she might be using Jimmy as a tool, not as her partner, not as someone that she is happily married with or
Mhm.
whatever. You know what I mean? Like he can inhabit this space, this character, a lot easier than she can. I know we're seeing a little bit of a different look in the way that she's dressing and stuff like that, but she can't really be Saul Goodman. She can't really be what they need in that regard. That's something that's right up Jimmy's alley, and that kind of gives me a little bit of concern that she's just using him for her purposes, which I just kind of don't want to believe
Mhm.
is the big thing that's happening here.
And we have seen Jimmy feel that way before.
Mhm.
He's accused her of basically, you want to come to me when you are ready to roll around in the mud,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
And then
he
I
doesn't
do
think that she respects him. That's for sure.
absolutely. And I think the first time we see them in episode 1, after they leave the house, she throws away the second best lawyer mug.
Mhm.
And that's where the way I read that between her and Jimmy is that maybe she's letting go of some of the sentimentality between them. That mug was important to Jimmy. When he and Mike were pushing his car into the ravine, he stopped it, ran back, and grabbed that mug because it was important to him. And she throws it out. Does that mean that maybe some of the romance is going away? and this marriage for her truly is just a professional thing, and she is just using him as a tool. I think that's how Jimmy read her throwing that mug away anyway. So we'll wait and see where her head's at. But at a minimum, I think that's how Jimmy read it.
Yeah, and there's another one here from Dove's house. Thank you for the $5. They said you all missed the Kim prison foreshadowing in the restaurant, and that's something I did see. I didn't mention it, but you know this is that scene where like you brought up earlier, where we don't know what they're saying. They continue to plan, but we get the outside look. You know, we're looking at things through the window, and there's kind of like bars on the window there.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say it means she's gonna go to prison, but it's, they're playing a dangerous game. They're flirting with law breaking, and we're being reminded there are potentially serious consequences for Kim.
Yeah, and I think there was another shot like this in season 4 where she was looking through the little things that they made for Mesa Verde, the little model banks or
Mhm.
whatever that people pointed out at that time looked like she was behind bars.
Which there I could definitely see thematically what they would be trying to say visually, because I think she felt a little trapped there when she was looking at all of the model banks that they were putting up. She had this feeling of, this is not what I wanted to do with my life, and I think she wanted to get out of there and she wanted to do the PD work. So at least that wasn't necessarily foreshadowing that she was going to prison, but she was in sort of a prison of her own making at the time.
Yeah. And then it could also work both ways though, couldn't it? You know, and I think that's the biggest thing that I'm thinking about with Kim right now is this has been a long road, and there's so much that we don't know about her still, and I just wonder how many twists and turns that are still going to develop in this last run. I mean, I feel like the climax of the Jimmy McGill story is Kim, right? I mean, whatever happens, it's pretty obvious that he's already got everything in place to become Saul. Like he literally became Saul already, but he still has too much Jimmy. He still has too much care for Kim in him. So something that's going to happen as he's on that slippery slope has to strip those things away from him, and that becomes the end of Jimmy McGill's story, right? And so how are you guys feeling about that after this setup here? I mean, do you it's kind of a little on the nose if she just gets a little bit too caught up in this idea of Howard, right? I feel like there has to be a little bit more that's going to come out here.
Yeah, I mean, the Mike storyline has always felt like a separate and parallel thing to the Jimmy storyline, and we know that they work with each other once you get to the time of Breaking Bad. So I think those worlds they have to collide this season in unexpected ways, and I think one of those unexpected ways is, to what degree will Kim be involved in those worlds colliding? I mean, of course, we've seen some of it when she stood up to Lalo last season, but going after Howard is one thing, but what happens when she gets involved in the goings on of the cartel? So I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I assume things are going to get dark. They're going to get violent. And like you said, it has to change Jimmy in some pretty substantial ways. He has to be able to deal with violence and not get traumatized by it. He needs to
Yeah.
get to a point where he can suggest to Walt, hey, maybe we send your brother-in-law to Belize.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I can't wait to see where they go. I mean, I feel like a broken record with it, but I mean, my big takeaway from the first 2 episodes were that this feels like it's moving towards the end.
Definitely.
And
Yeah.
as much as I'm invested and as much as it's a prequel and I already know where so many of these characters already end up, like I still it's really hard to speculate on how that's going to play out.
Yeah, I'm really excited, even just logistically, to see how they intertwine with the Breaking Bad timeline. It's it's such an interesting question to see what exactly they're going to do. Like, imagine if we see Kim interacting with Jesse or Walt, some scene that took place that we didn't know about in Breaking Bad. I don't think that's likely necessarily, but unexpected things like that, even just from a fanboy standpoint, I'm just excited to see how they pull it off.
Well, yeah, it's pretty fascinating because I read an interview where they asked why they decided to announce that Jesse and Walt would be coming back, that Bryan Cranston and Aaron Paul would be appearing, and they said that it wasn't the biggest twist or the biggest shock that's going to happen. So they thought it was all right to throw that out there, and that's pretty exciting when you think about it.
Yeah, I've always thought that they had to show up because you can't just gloss over Breaking Bad. That was such an important. That's what turned Saul into Gene. It's a pretty important event in his life. So, I mean, I guess it's a twist that they're coming back. If you think of the show from a meta standpoint, like getting these actors to come back, it's an impressive thing. But if somebody were writing a book, you would 100% expect Walt and Jesse to show up at some point.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand the idea of you don't want there to be a cheap, just bring them in and, just to for fan service, but I think there's legitimate reasons why they need to tie the two series together, like you mentioned. I think it can be done in flash forwards. I don't think they need to show up in the Jimmy McGill timeline necessarily,
Yeah. I mean, I think we're still a few years out from that. So
yeah, we're 4 years.
Yeah.
At the end of the PPD, it was 4 years between that and the first episode of Breaking Bad.
Yeah, so I think that would have to be a flash forward, I would guess.
Flash forward, or I've been saying it for a while. A lot of people don't agree with me, but this show loves montages. And we did gloss over, I think, 6 months back in season 4 with the Something Stupid montage. So
Yeah.
could we get through those 4 years with some sort of a montage? They get into some kind of Saul Goodman, Kim's helping him behind the scenes, some kind of status quo until something major bulldozes into Saul's life and ruins it. And that bulldozer is named Walter White.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I understand why, this is, people want them to handle it in a way that isn't fan servicey. And, I think that these guys obviously have earned I think they understand the same concerns that people have. They're not, operating out of some kind of bubble. And I just think that it would be such a huge thing, you know what I mean? Like, I talked about this on one of the podcasts I was on, with Bald Move. Like you can say I don't want to see fan service, but seeing Walter White is something that is a thrill. You know what I mean? It's something that there's just something it's something that you've been waiting to see, and it's going to be fun when it happens.
Right. We do all want to see fan service, but not in a
Yeah.
distracting way where it feels like, one thing the show does so well that some other shows and stories don't do well is it never forces characters to be somewhere just for the sake of plot. For example, they
Yeah.
talked about how much they would love to do an episode of Jimmy and Mike having to, for some reason, make a trek through the desert. And it took them, 5 or so years to get there, because they will always abide by the characters. They will always follow the characters in a natural way. And if it takes if it takes Jimmy 6 years to become Saul Goodman, it's going to take 6 years. So these writers, maybe more than any other writers I've ever watched, have completely earned my trust. So, yes, I do want fan service, but only
just not in a contrived way.
Yeah, right? Exactly. I trust Peter Gould, Vince Gilligan, Tom Schnauz, and the other writers to give us proper fan service.
Yeah, I agree too. I mean, like I said, I know that it's going to bring the house down, and I'm here for it. I'm anxiously anticipating it. I wonder if it's going to happen in the first half of the season.
Mm-hmm.
What do you guys think? What do you think the chances, first half or second half?
For the Walt and Jesse appearance?
I think they're going to milk it. I think they're going to wait till the second half.
Yeah, I mean, first half would be pretty shocking. I mean, if it was done in a flash forward, I guess they could make that work. But yeah, I'd put my money on second half. It's just too exciting to use in the first 7 episodes.
Would you like to see a scene from a different perspective? I know that's been an idea that's been out there. One thing that I could see them maybe adding some context is the time in Ed's basement with
Yeah.
Walt and Jimmy. Like I could see that being something that might be worth revisiting.
Yeah, I almost just from when you listen to the Insider podcast, you can hear how excited they get just by like having to recreate Gus's trailer or having to
Yeah.
recreate the hay truck that transports you
Mhm.
across the border. So I feel like it would almost be too fun of a challenge for them to walk away from, to try and maybe even take footage from Breaking Bad, but then try to film new footage from a different perspective and seamlessly integrate them, kind of Back to the Future 2 style, where Marty goes back in time and you see scenes from the first movie from a different perspective. I think from a pure storytelling standpoint, it makes sense because all of these events were very important for Jimmy McGill, Saul Goodman, and then just from like a geeky filmmaking standpoint, I feel like the writers just wouldn't give up the chance and a challenge to do that.
Yeah, and I think they did I think they had to rebuild his office whenever they did the 405 flash forward.
That's
Like,
right.
that wasn't
Quite a ride.
I think that I remember that in the Insider podcast back then was that they were saying they had to rebuild the whole thing, from photographs.
And you can hear they love doing it. You can hear the
Of
passion.
course. Can you imagine going into the office for the day and being like, "Hey, you know what? I had an idea. Can we rebuild Saul's, an exact replica of Saul's office? Could we do that?"
Yeah, that's a day job I wouldn't mind.
Yeah. We got another question here. Sorry, my dogs are freaking out in the other room.
Is it considered
Doug's
a
house.
question if it ends in 4 exclamation points?
Maybe it's not. I didn't read it. I just clicked on it. Better Break North, new series. Nacho escapes to Alaska, hires Jesse 6 years later. What would you guys think about if they brought in a post El Camino scene?
So I don't think it's impossible, but if it does, I think if it was post El Camino, it would purely be in the sense that it literally in the timeline takes place after El Camino. I doubt we'd see Jesse at that point.
El Camino already felt, I liked it, but it already felt a little gratuitous to me.
How dare you?
So to have even more Jesse like post El Camino, unless they did something really interesting, I would have a bit of an eye roll toward that one.
Yeah, I think it would be hard to make that mean something. You know what I mean? Like it's better not to know what happens to him. It's better to know that he had a chance and then fill in those blanks yourself of what that might look like, I think. Then
I like to imagine he built a cabin.
Yeah.
If we don't know, he can do anything you want,
Right. But he does
If
love
they-
to build that box he built in art class.
Yeah. Was it shop class or something?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, that I would be not. I mean, I wouldn't put it past them being able to pull off a post El Camino scene, but I wouldn't be rooting for that if it came up in the in possibilities. How are you guys doing on time? I just
We're
are
good.
you able to hang out for a
Yeah.
little bit longer?
Yeah, for
Okay,
sure.
just let me know if we need to wrap it up. I don't think we mentioned it. I was thinking around 2 hours, but I don't think we mentioned before we jumped in. So I have a tendency that if people keep asking questions to just kind of answer them and get lost and not really think about what else is going on. So we have another one here from Maud Mary. Thank you for the $4.99. I think I've identified Huel as the one getting money from Jimmy in the car. Same shirt. Can you speculate on what this might mean? Do you guys want to talk about teasers and potential stuff?
I didn't watch it.
Oh, this is next time on.
Yeah.
Okay, I was saying like I do not remember this at all.
I was puzzling over that.
Yeah, we usually don't watch those. I don't mind if you want to talk about it, but we usually don't watch the next time on and try to remain as unsullied as possible.
All right, so I'm gonna speak to this vaguely, I guess. a bunch of people pointed this out in the comments of my last video, which makes me believe that there's probably something to it. I did look at the shirts. I don't know that it's 100%, but it's, there's a resemblance. But as far as what it might mean, I mean, we see that Huel is doing something there, and I kind of think that what I said in the actual video about what he might be purchasing, I think those things might be connected. What Huel is doing and that little gadget that we see. But other than that, I don't know. And these guys don't watch ahead, and I know other people feel that way too. So I wish I could give you a better answer, but that's all I really got.
Well, having not seen it, just based purely on what I'm hearing you say, my speculation is that Huel has taken some of Jimmy's money to buy a giant machine gun to mount in the back of his trunk.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do we have a machine gun here, do you think? Do we have the thing that they're going to have to try to figure out how to bring back into the story later? I mean, I know in season 5 they talk about this all the time, about how that was.
I think that's Kim.
I was going to say, I think Gene is the machine gun, because the idea is you flash forward to something and then you have to explain it.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, in that sense, yeah, Gene is the machine gun. It's been kind of lingering the entire series.
Yeah, I would not put it past these writers to have had the whole thing with the cab driver recognize him last season. I wouldn't put it past them to have put that in season 5, not knowing exactly how it was going to pay off in season 6.
Mhm.
That could be a machine gun scenario. And for people unaware, basically what we're talking about is, if you remember in season 5 of Breaking Bad, we had a flash forward to a big machine gun in Walter White's trunk. And apparently the writers put that in, not knowing how it was going to pay off.
And Vince Gilligan complains about it. Like he said that it was like he kept kicking himself because he's like, why did we do that? We have to figure out a use for this thing, but it just, nothing was working, and it was just bothering him from writing the whole season of like how they were going to actually use this thing. And I think they came up with a pretty good idea at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. It did occur to me, by the way, that if I remember correctly, Jimmy or Saul is the one that introduces Walt and Jesse to the pest. What do you call them? The exterminators.
Vamonos.
Ira.
Todd and all of them. Yeah, Ira.
Yeah,
and Jimmy worked with Ira to steal the Hummel figure.
Yeah, Alpine Shepherd or Bavarian Boy.
That's right.
Yeah.
So we may see possibly this season Jimmy meeting them, or maybe hearing about Ira's new gig as an exterminator.
That's true. That is, there's a lot of possibility. There's so much road they could, if they really decide to dip into that timeline, there's so many different things that they could actually, so many directions they could go. I guess we'll start to think about, we'll start to take some questions if people have them down in the comments, and we'll start to wrap things up. Like I said, maybe we'll try to hit about 2 hours here. Anything that you guys wanted to bring up that we didn't touch on already?
I just want to go on record and say the Salamancas are definitely evil.
Yeah.
Lalo's an evil person.
That's still bothering you?
Yeah. If I ever run for office one day, I don't want people to say he defended a serial killer.
Yeah, will you condemn the Salamanca?
Yeah. Will you condemn Lalo and say that he is actually pure evil at this point? Because it seemed like you kind of like the guy. I mean, but that's the joy. That's why Lalo is so good, is because you can't help but kind of like the guy.
Yeah, like when Nacho was having drinks with him in season 5, right before he opened the gate, I was a little jealous of Nacho. I want to have a drink with Lalo.
Yeah, I mean, just work on the car, hang out, talk about how to talk to the boss when you go see the cartel.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Eat some great food. Like, he's always making food for people.
That's
like,
right.
you know what I mean? Like, that has to be something to try.
When we first met him, he was cooking, right? And he
Yeah.
turned to Nacho. He's like, "You got to try this. you're gonna die.
Oh yeah.
It's a special family recipe. Ah, Salamanca recipe. I see what you're doing there. We got another
Another spin-off idea.
another spin-off idea here from Dove's House, and thanks again for the $5. Breaking Boston. Bill Burr escapes Nacho to Boston and links up with Nacho 6 years later. Wicked bro. Bill Burr, I was surprised that I guess I'm going to mention the teaser again, that part that they were just talking about with Huel. I was surprised that wasn't Bill Burr. I wonder if we're going to get a Kubi, if Kubi's schedule will make it possible for him to come back. He's one of the main characters that really would make sense to show up in Saul's story. Can you think of any other ones that we might be expecting to see in these next couple of episodes?
The only one that I was thinking of that hadn't occurred to me before was Jack and the Exterminator crew. And of course, Bill Burr I thought about, but you mentioned that.
I mean, I don't know if we'll see it in this series, but at some point that secretary that he has is going to show up.
She was the one they hired temporarily. She's got to come back at some point. That's right.
Yeah, Francesca will definitely be back.
Oh, Francesca, yeah.
She's been there for a long time by the time we see her at the strip mall.
And she's had enough of Saul Goodman by that point.
Yeah.
On the Breaking Boston idea, that did remind me of another show that Vince Gilligan worked on, which is getting a spinoff. X-Files. They're apparently doing an animated spinoff called X-Files Albuquerque, and it's going to be a kind of humorous take on it. And at the same time, that also reminded me that they're doing some animated Slippin' Jimmy cartoons on the AMC website. So if you're going into the comedy route anyway, X-Files Albuquerque, I wouldn't mind Saul Goodman showing up there as a recurring character, maybe.
Yeah, that would be cool. I did see those the trailer for that Slippin' Jimmy thing. It didn't seem to it didn't seem to hit that same sweet spot that the TV show did. It felt almost like it was geared towards kids. I don't know if you guys watched that or not.
No, I do want to check it out. I'm just really curious what that'll look like, what the animation style will be and everything.
I mean, I watched a bunch of the Gus Pollos Hermanos training videos. Did it look like similar to that?
Well, this one's
this is more like this is more like a
combination.
Yeah, this is more like a young Jimmy with other characters. Maybe Marco was one of them.
So he's like really like a little cartoon character.
Yeah, and it just wasn't. It didn't seem like it was geared towards it seemed kind of like it was childlike in the way that they were doing things. So I don't really know what to expect from that.
I just got to know, are they canon? If they're canon, I'll watch them,
That's an interesting question. I'm guessing you guys probably saw the American Greed that they made on April Fool's Day. The thing CNBC put out about Jimmy McGill.
No, I didn't see
that. I remember hearing about that. I don't know if I watched it.
Oh, it's fantastic. That's something that you should go and watch as soon as you get done here. It's basically like the real show American Greed, like up to the first commercial, and it's all about Jimmy.
Oh, awesome.
That's cool.
Like they talk to Bill, and they talk to the other AD, I can't remember her name, Erickson. And they have the Kettlemans show up and stuff like that.
Awesome.
We got to check that out.
Yeah,
it's really good. It's really, really good.
That sort of reminds me of the bit they did for the Emmys one year, where they have Jesse show up at the office, like the show The Office, and Jesse's like, "Yo, Creed, what's going on here?" And Creed's like, "Oh, it's okay, guys. My methamphetamine is here."
Or I saw one where Jesse finds Bryan Cranston still living in the RV from Breaking Bad. Like he doesn't want to let go of that character.
I'm trying to look and see if I see any questions.
I saw somebody ask gas fee. Here we go. Was the guy who stole the tiny statue for Jimmy the same guy that ran the Exterminator Company in Breaking Bad? Yeah, we mentioned that. We kind of glossed over it earlier, but yeah, Jimmy worked with a man named Ira, who, if you recall, ended up trapped under a desk for a few hours.
That was awesome.
Which was, it was hilarious. And yes, that I don't know if he ran the Exterminator Company. I don't know. but he was
Yeah, I think it
definitely
was his. I think he was the boss, and then
okay.
Todd and the others worked for him, and
Yep.
that's
I just
how
love
they
when he said,
decided.
sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying that's how they decided to take over and use that as as a way to cook, was because Saul had dealt with him for a few years whenever they got in trouble for stealing from their clients, and obviously we saw that started in um, episode 4 or season 4.
Yeah. I love that in that scene when he's hiding under the desk and the guy orders the pizza. It's like, you got to
Yeah,
come help me. Help me. He's all like, this guy's in for the night.
yeah. Yeah, that was one of those. That's season 4. I remember watching that the first time, and we haven't talked about this yet. Gil, we talked about the first 3 seasons on the podcast, but we never got into 4, and that's where I think it really gets interesting. How they did this thing with Jimmy in the beginning of season 4 where he doesn't know how he feels. He doesn't know what's going on. He doesn't know how to react to the fact that this happened, and he has this PTSD. And that's all still under the surface for where he's at right now. You know what I mean? So I think that's pretty interesting that he never moves past that place he was in after Chuck's death. He just sort of got swept up into being a friend of the cartel and had a little bit more trauma like piled on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
And now his wife, who he loves more than anything, is pulling him through this, elaborate scam, and he can't help but get caught up in it. It's obviously enjoyable to think about that rather than what he's experienced over the last couple seasons of this show.
Mhm. I do really wonder if we're going to see some kind of reckoning with the emotions that Jimmy never really confronted with Chuck. It's hard to imagine how that's going to happen. It could happen through Howard, where he confronts Jimmy in a very tense moment, and there is some kind of conversation about it. But I think there's a guilt that Jimmy has never really confronted. As soon as he learns that the insurance premiums going up are what caused Howard to force Chuck out of retirement, which led to Lantern. As soon as Jimmy found that out, he immediately perked up, got a big smile, and no longer seemed disturbed by his brother's death. Like a master class in bottling up your emotions and just not dealing with guilt. And I really wonder if we're going to see some kind of reckoning, Jimmy just dealing with those emotions at some point.
Yeah, I mean, we saw them come out a little bit in season 5 at the end of 507 when he does the lightning bolts shoot from my fingertips
Oh,
thing,
yeah.
but there was no real consequence to that other than he looked like a nut job. You know what I mean?
Right.
It feels like there's still a price that he hasn't exactly paid yet, that's going to come due, like a bill that's going to come due there. We did mention the idea of who might be following Jimmy and Kim at the end of the episode, right? Or at least we
Oh,
said to the point.
we briefly mentioned it, but I don't know if we did a lot of speculating on who that might be yet.
Okay, we did say that we thought it was not Lalo initially. We had talked about that, and then I know my feelings changed after I watched the teaser. Where are you at on that right now?
Yeah, so I initially thought Lalo, and then again, I think I said this earlier, but on rewatch, realized that this really doesn't add up. We specifically see Lalo decide not to cross the border, so it
Yeah,
wouldn't make sense for him to be in proximity to Jimmy and Kim. The theory I've seen floated a lot is that Howard possibly hired a PI to follow them. I do kind
yeah,
of like that theory because, like we talked, this we did talk a bunch about, but I think it makes total sense for Howard to already suspect some foul play. As soon as he sees those drugs in his locker, he's going to think of the prostitutes that showed up at his lunch. He's going to think Jimmy's up to something. And he's going to think
hmm
about the last time he saw somebody go head to head with Jimmy, Chuck. And Chuck hired a PI to hang around the house, wait for Jimmy to barge in and destroy the tape. So I could see the dots getting connected in Howard's head. Maybe it's even the same PI. I could see
yeah.
that. It could
That's what
also
people
be,
were.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say. I was just saying that was the idea, that there's a shot where we see the 3 of them, but the third character is kind of out of focus, and if you want to see that as the guy that Chuck hired, it's there. You know what I mean?
Oh, really? Okay. Okay. So if you look at like
So
the
a lot
just
of people
blurry
have
shape.
kind of yeah, a lot of people have kind of already. That's just that's just the truth. It's been accepted, but I'm not 100% sure. But I am leaning towards that. It makes a lot of sense, like you're
Mhm.
pointing out.
It could also be the detective trying to find De Guzman. That's another possibility I saw floated. I think right now my money's on Howard, PI, but I
True,
think
but yeah, Saul brought suspicion on himself with his just first of all, just by representing De Guzman and the fact that he was able to pay the bail is a huge red flag alone. Then there's also the slip up where he revealed Lalo's name.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of reasons for people to have eyes on him.
Yeah, and I think that is what we're going to see in the next episode. We're going to see that it's not just from one direction; it's from all directions that they're going to have to be being careful. Like, you know what I mean? Like you mentioned, it kind of came out a little bit in season 1 where we saw that everyone involved in that situation already had some history with Jimmy. Cliff Main, Howard, and
Yeah.
Kevin Wachtel, and that there's ripple effects to those kinds of things that
Mhm.
that play out in a person's life, and it's he's also a friend of the cartel, which that's not something that doesn't come with responsibility.
Right.
Pete speaking from experience.
Yeah. Let me tell you.
Yeah, I can't really talk about that, but it's not something that you just walk away from. Let's leave it there. Speaking of gangsters, we got another super chat from Dove's house. Godfather 2 ending scene. Chuck, Kim, Howard, and Jimmy in a conference room celebrating somebody's birthday before Jimmy has his law degree. What do you make of that?
Well, I think we got a scene kind of with a similar tone to the Winner, season 4, episode 10, when we see the flashback to essentially the best moment between Jimmy and Chuck, where they're on stage singing together. You still see some of the dynamic where Chuck takes the mic and he still sees himself as kind of the superior brother, but it ends with them lying on a bed together singing. So, in terms of a quick scene of people being happy together before everything went wrong, we got some flash of that.
In a little weird coincidence, this person Venture Sly has Vito Corleone as their
Wow.
Abby. But what do you think about this? He thinks that he's looking for the same guy that set up Tuco. This never really crossed my mind. Do you guys have anything? Does that sound possible to you?
Well, if Lalo really digs into like police reports and stuff or the past and figures out first of all what happened with Tuco, that he beat the crap out of this old guy. Wait a minute, that's the same old guy I met at the lab. That's a possibility.
But if this were the case, I feel like he would have crossed the border.
Yeah,
Like,
that's
it's
the
got to
thing.
be something that would have required him to stay in Mexico, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying anything about it because I read something that Peter Gould said that that totally goes in a different kind of direction, which, you can't really
Okay.
say if he's trying to lead you in that direction or if he's just bringing it up, but it kind of influenced the way I'm thinking about it. And, I don't want to influence everybody else, because if they're not into reading about what people are talking
Mhm.
about or looking at teasers and stuff like that, then I don't want to
What's with
spoil,
these guys they're spoiling everything? It's funny if you see before they officially announced Jesse and Walt coming back, you see like a red carpet interview with Peter Gould and Vince Gilligan, and they're asked the question, "Will we see Walt and
Yeah.
Jesse?" Peter Gould gives kind of a vague answer, and then Vince Gilligan kind of smiles, opens his mouth, they put the mic in front of his face, he hesitates, take the mic away, and then he's like, "Up." So they put the mic back, and he goes, "Let's just say it would be a shame if they didn't show up, right?" And then Peter Gould
Yeah.
goes, "Well, there you go."
Yeah.
So to me, it looked like he slipped up. It's kind of like when Jimmy said Lalo, and then they were like, "All right, let's just announce it,"
Yeah.
Yeah, he actually, there's a lot of interviews that came out right after the first 2 episodes aired, where Peter Gould does get into a lot of different things, and he kind of prefaces it by saying that he's not giving away the big stuff, which
Okay.
is like I said, I was kind of in the rabbit hole yesterday. I was making a video about the teaser and then just sort of clearing up the idea of what was going on with the safe, because a lot of people were asking about that with Gus and Mike and Nacho. And I kept finding more different stuff that he was saying. And I was like, wow, that totally changes my mind about this thing or that thing, you know.
Interesting.
He's being pretty open about talking about some of the thought process they had getting us into this season and stuff. It's interesting.
One day I'm going to go back and listen to all of those.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I've been listening to the Insider podcast for a long time. We've mentioned that. They always add some interesting tidbits there. I feel like this year there's just a lot of print stuff that he's doing too. They're promoting it in a way that they they're definitely doing it at some justice for its final season.
Yeah,
feel like.
there's a lot of hype, definitely.
Yeah.
And I feel like the show, the audience for it has grown a lot since it first started, because I remember going around, like, I was always a huge Breaking Bad fan, and I had all these friends who were too. And I'm like, hey, have you guys been watching Better Call Saul? And they're just like, oh no, I never got around to it. And way more people that I know personally are super excited about the show now than it used to be.
Yeah, I think that they kind of lost some of their steam. I mean, I think that they've kept a pretty consistent pretty consistent numbers. I think people have always watched, but it never reached that next level that water cooler level that Breaking Bad was, like where just people you had nothing else in common with, you could talk
Yeah.
about Breaking Bad because everybody watched it. I think that like a lot of the press, they didn't really cover those middle seasons. I think they kind of lost interest in some ways, and I feel like after season 5 that was rekindled some, and now there's a lot more people, at least on that end, that are talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
So we're gonna, I guess, wrap things up here. I did want to bring up that idea of wolves and sheep one last time. I think that I've been thinking about that a lot. I don't really have anything too profound to say about it, but I do think about the whole, nature and nurture and how Jimmy became who he is, and how this last season's going to kind of help him realize his final form, as it were, at least before we get back to Gene and see how it all ends or whatever. And I think that this idea, there's still a lot about Jimmy that we don't know. I hope we get a little bit more of that. One of the things that I would like to know a little bit more about is his relationship with his father, and this idea that Chuck had, that he stole all this money. That was sort of what gave Chuck, that was sort of the thing that let Chuck dehumanize his brother a little bit, was that he could never really trust him because he knew what he did, and he killed his father basically. So, I thought that was something that popping up at the end here when he's watching Kim move into a different position, take a different turn than what I thought that in season 5, whenever he sees the finger guns and he's sitting there and he's kind of like, wait a minute, there's something here that I didn't notice all this time. You know what I mean? So I don't know if you guys have anything that you want that brings up for you or anything, but I think it's something that we need to keep in the back of our mind going forward.
No, nothing to add really, besides, yeah, I mean, we have to keep it in mind. And I'm so excited to see where things go this season with Kim, with how do things go with Kim, and how does that affect her relationship with Jimmy? How does that affect Jimmy himself? When Jimmy becomes Saul Goodman, how much of Jimmy is still there? How much of Saul is just an act? Is he buying all those things in his house just to make him feel good? When he's Gene Takovic, where's his head at? Is he regretful? Does he pine for the days of Saul Goodman? Does he regret the days of Saul Goodman? And then where does he go from there? So it's just amazing that there's so much I'm curious about that purely exists on the where are these characters' heads at level. It's not Breaking Bad where I'm wondering, will Jesse live? Will Walt live? It's where's Jimmy's head at? Where is Kim's head at?
Mhm.
What will these characters be at the end of this series?
And here's one tiny little insight in the transition from Saul Goodman to Gene. Gene is no longer taking the hair pills.
Yeah, I thought
Right?
about that earlier. Clearly, he's gone bald.
He either doesn't care, or probably more likely it's a good disguise.
Mhm.
Yeah, it would help to not look like Saul Goodman, I
Yeah.
guess, if you're in
No matter how much you want to have a full head of hair.
Yeah. It's another thing he lost.
Yeah, among many.
That's one of the things I loved about the opening too, was that, you know, it's showing us all this opulence, but it's also being packed up and taken away and seized. You know what I mean?
Some stuff's
Everything.
being put into that no value box.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, like he saved all this stuff. He had a reason that some things beyond, you know, that were precious for beyond just like, you know, whatever monetary gain he had out of all of his scamming and that whole lifestyle. And it all gets brushed away at the end. He doesn't carry any of it into that lifestyle. He has one shoebox in Gene's closet that he can hold on to there.
Yeah.
So, do you guys have anything else that you want to? I mean, obviously you can plug your podcast here and your YouTube channel, Gil.
Yeah,
if
no,
there's
just
nothing else you want to say about the show.
yeah, I think we'll definitely have more to say as the season goes on. I think at this point I've gotten I'm just ready for episode 3. I'm ready to see where this goes next.
Yeah.
You can, if you want to hear Adam and I talk more about Better Call Saul, you can look up Saulcast on any podcast app. You can also watch the episodes at our YouTube channel, One Take.
We do an episode, an instant take right after the show airs, so to kind of give you that feeling of like right after the show's ending, you can rave about all your theories with us. And then we do a longer analysis later in the week.
That's right.
Tell them about Saul Week, all the good videos.
So, yeah. So in the lead up to the new season, I was doing a new Better Call Saul video daily. So if you're craving more Better Call Saul content between now and episode 3, if you go over to One Take, you'll see a bunch of Better Call Saul kind of video essay style videos.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely worth checking out. I'm trying to think, do we we'll talk about this afterwards, but I would like to talk to you guys again, and maybe get some other people involved as we go on. So throw it out there that we might be continuing. This was sort of an experiment, this first one. You know, we know each other, we talked to each other about the show. We wanted to get into a little bit more. We were glad everybody showed up, so we want to thank you guys for that. You know, it seems like it was a pretty good conversation, and I liked reading what you guys were saying there in the comments. So there's a possibility that we might do some more of these down the road. Is there anything else? Because we have this big question here, the one that's on everyone's mind, that I thought we could go out on if there's nothing else.
So I think I know the answer to this. So
what about Price? Will he come back? Will he be back?
In Breaking Bad, we had Gale, kind of a goofy character, ended up getting killed, but he showed up one more time because there was a video of him singing karaoke. Price, there was also a video of him sitting on pies. So I think Price is going to have to get killed, and we think, oh, we'll never see him again. A few episodes later, we're going to see that tape.
He's going to be identified by who? I don't know, but that tape is the Chekhov's gun of the real Chekhov's gun of
Chekhov's cheeks.
Yeah, of Better Call Saul, huh? Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, I don't know. I hope that they find thoughtful ways to bring all of the characters back. If you want to know the truth, you know, if they make sense for the story, please bring them. Because one thing I got out of rewatching was, man, there's so many good characters in this universe.
Yeah. You just do it Seinfeld style, where Gene, you know, they find out who he is. He's placed under arrest, and they have a whole jury trial. And so they have to bring in character witnesses.
Yeah.
So they bring back anyone he's ever interacted with.
Skinny Pete and Badger show up. They get to testify on the stand together, like as a unit.
Yeah, we'll see. All right. Well, like again, I guess, yeah, let's close this out. Thanks again, everyone who showed up. Thanks for everyone who contributed, definitely for all the super chats. It makes it, definitely makes it a little bit easier to set aside a couple hours to work on this and not do other things related to the channel. And it's so much fun to talk about these things in a way that we can't really do whenever we're just, editing down a 15 or 20-minute video. So I'm super excited. See where this season goes. Excited to talk about it more. And that's all I got. Do you guys got anything else you want to say there?
No, I'll just say thank you to everybody who joined. These live streams are the most fun when there's an audience to interact with. And then Pete,
Absolutely.
thank you for arranging this. And when I first started out YouTubing a couple of years ago, your channel was one of the channels I watched to learn from. And I never thought a couple years later I would have the honor of being on a live stream with you. So thank you for arranging this. And this was a lot of fun. I would definitely like to do it again.
Yeah, and it was nice to meet you, Adam. This is our first interaction, and I thought you brought a lot of interesting stuff to the conversation too. And yeah, I'm always down to talk. And you guys are doing good content that I think everyone should check out, and hope we can make some more.
Yeah,
sure.
Me too. Thanks for having us.
Yep. All right. Thanks again, guys.